Dream Stories podcast. We're glad you're back with us again this week. And Lisa and I are here to talk about dreams again.
What? Are you kidding me? Dreams?
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And we don't have a guest this week. We had a guest scheduled, but we had really bad weather this week. We had tornadoes and things.
Oh, my goodness, yeah. And Mississippi, such destruction.
So we postponed our guest to come back a different day, so make it a little easier.
It'll be good. Everything falls in its timing as it needs to be.
It does.
Well, I'm just curious. Are we going to talk about your dream that you had this week?
Well,
does it fit in there somehow?
It does fit, but
we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see.
I don't know.
Okay.
It was a weird dream.
Yeah.
So alligators and tapeworms.
If it were not for me, I mean, I'm not tooting my horn or anything, but if it were not for me, you would not probably recollect some of the things you've done in your sleep because you react. You are very reactive.
I do not struggle with sleep paralysis very often. On the other hand, you do.
I do. And it's really interesting. I don't know if it's based in fear or not because there have actually, do we want to just go right into it? What are we talking about today?
Well, we can talk about
sleep
physically responding in a dream, literally physically responding,
right?
And sleep paralysis issues. We've talked a little bit about it in the past, but it's been a while, so it probably would be a good opportunity to touch base again. So,
well, I believe that our Creator has put within us, and this is medically sound, actually, what they call science. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You blinded me with science.
Okay. I'm not.
That's what you do
I'm not going to let you sing that song.
The
but anyway,
medical knowledge you have.
Yeah. What I was going to say was that our bodies actually are paralyzed while we're sleeping. There is something that is inactivated in us while we're sleeping, so we don't harm ourselves. I mean, if we begin to act out our dreams, we could literally harm ourselves. But there are some times when that system does not work completely. It can be faulty. That's why we see people who sleepwalk.
Yeah, and another place it comes up is in falling dreams. A lot of times when people are falling, it's one of the top 20 dreams that people have all over the world.
Right.
People are falling, they'll often jerk themselves awake right before they hit or as they fall.
As they're falling. I had that happen to me the other day. And I find out sometimes it's usually at the very beginning, at the first time I'm falling asleep, because I fall asleep several times during the night. I tell people all the time, don't freak out if you think you wake up too much in the night. It's not unusual for you to shift and wake up every hour and a half. That's normal. Some people just struggle going back to sleep. But it's usually, for me, it's that first time falling asleep in the evening, or if I'm doing it at nap time. I've noticed it at nap time. It happens to me a lot.
And there is a little bit of a difference. What you're talking about and what I'm talking about are slightly different.
Okay.
Because what you're talking about is that not quite there between wake and sleep, and something startles you, and it's like you're falling, but it's not necessarily a dream of actually falling that wakes you up.
Okay,
so
that's true.
There's that little difference.
That's true.
Same concept,
Right.
but just a slight difference in the way. And the dream side of it, we can interpret.
Right.
The just jerk that comes when you sort of
good.
feel like you're falling as you're going to sleep is a little something different. And that's not something that we really need to interpret.
Okay, that's true.
And the reason I say that is because literal falling dreams, if you have a dream where you're falling and you fall off a building or you fall out of bed in the dream, and it jerks you awake, that sleep paralysis breaks and you sort of jerk as you fall.
Right.
That type of dream is often about being out of control. So not having control of something, feeling out of control. So it happens a lot for people when they're really struggling with stress and anxiety or issues or things that are going on in their life that they don't feel like they have the ability to control or handle. They'll tend to have a falling dream.
Okay, and how did we get there when we were going to talk about sleep paralysis?
Well, we're still talking about sleep paralysis because we're talking about what will disconnect you from sleep paralysis. And a falling dream does that a lot of times.
Yeah, and I remember when you were in law school, you told me about a case y'all had to study about. I don't know if you remember this or not. oh, he's on the spot now, where a guy, it was a murder case where a guy, I think, bludgeoned his wife to death or something with a bat, and he claimed he was sleepwalking.
Oh, I do
and
sort of
it was like, it was a, precedent. It was like unprecedented that this person was claiming that, the dream, that he was actually dreaming, that he never meant to kill his wife. He didn't even recollect it or anything. Yeah. So it's good that we have that protection because, you don't want to do something dangerous, so it is good. But sometimes it does malfunction. And I'm not going to say malfunction. It just operates differently. Sometimes we don't know why. Right. Yeah, we don't know why it does it the way it does. But I said maybe mine is sometimes based in fear because and I know that there have been times where I have been afraid it was going to happen. And I would think to myself, I sure hope I don't go into one of those weird dreams where I can't wake up. And I mean that within 30 minutes of me falling asleep, here I am. I can't wake myself up and something's about to happen. And sometimes nothing is happening. I'm just in this state of not being able to move or talk. And I've been moaning, like trying to get your attention. I'll try to move one finger.
Well, and that is something most people, it creates fear if it's not caused by fear.
Right.
Because people will ask us all the time about what happens when I feel like I can't move or I can't speak. Is that a demon attacking me? Is that a spiritual assault? Is something wrong with me in those cases? And in some cases, it can be. It can be the dark spiritual realm coming against you and trying to hold you, or people will talk about being held or held down, or their mouth covered in their dreams. Those are night terrors,
right?
And they play off of sleep paralysis because what will happen is you'll go into just enough twilight. Just enough of the twilight time where you're kind of awake. You'll move a little bit into that realm of lucid dreaming so that you're dreaming, but you can't wake up. You can't move. You can't speak. That's a recognition of something that's medical.
Right.
Your body is still paralyzed. It hadn't moved out of that sleep paralysis state yet. But our adversary will use that because he is oppressing us in the dream. He'll then use by allowing us to slip into that twilight or lucid dreaming state where we realize we're dreaming, but we're awake just enough to know our body's still paralyzed.
Right.
And so now we feel like the dream attack is physically impacting us. And there are, of course, those rare cases. I say rare. There are those cases, I won't necessarily call it rare, where a dark spiritual force, a demonic entity or whatever, may actually literally be attacking someone and it causing that feeling as opposed to sleep paralysis. But for most people, that's not the case. It's just the cross between the dream and the physical reaction
side,
to being asleep. And so for 98% of people, you can't let yourself get stressed out of, what was that? Something terrible spiritual was happening to me.
Right. I know that I have had some instances when I was dreaming where I felt like my heart had stopped, and I remember it gave me a panic in my dream. And when I woke up, my heart was actually beating kind of out of rhythm. And come to find out, I have PVC, so I've been having them since I was 20-something years old. It's just a little it's not really a murmur. My doctor called it a murmur, but there's nothing wrong with me. It's very common.
It's just the way your heart beats.
Right.
It beats a little bit.
But sometimes it'll just slow down and there'll be a long pause there. So, but anyway, so there are outside things. When I say outside things, I mean things even within our body that are happening that affect our dreams, and I've even talked about how a telephone has rang before and it incorporated into my dream and things like that. So even when you're, like, for instance, when my heart got out of rhythm that time and I was paralyzed, I couldn't do anything, and I remember waking up panicking. I also have a son that this is very same thing has happened to, and he struggles with it too.
Yeah, and there you're talking about a category of dream we would call a body dream, and really what we're talking about in this episode is this correlation between physical world and dream world. And sometimes that correlation crosses over on the sleep paralysis. Sometimes it crosses over with things in the natural world impacting our dream. And in that particular case, it's physically what's going on with your body, a physical condition bleeding into the dream. Believe it or not, there's another really weird application of that only women have, and that's pregnancy dreams.
Right.
When the baby actually causes certain types of dreams. The baby, we know medically that babies in utero dream. They do the brainwave stuff. I don't understand. You may know more about it than I do, but I read an article about it. And there is this impact of their dreaming on the body of the mother that can cause a crossover. And some people would say even sharing dreams. Now, I've never.
It would be really hard to
there,
prove
so
that, but there probably is some type of correlation, mother's body picking up on something happening with the baby. I don't know. But, yeah, and I mean, it's one of those things where even though you may be paralyzed, there is that connection, like you said, with the body, because I know that there have been so many times where I've been laying there in that paralyzed type state. And I could actually, like, maybe my eye was slightly open, like there was just a little sliver, and I could actually see you. I could actually sense things going on in the room, but I could not break out of it. Now, most of the time, even though I've made it a point to kind of train myself where I say, okay, if I get in that place again, I'm going to relax, and I'm just going to breathe. And I'm not going to try and fight it because it seems like when you fight it, it makes it worse. Yeah. So I do pray when I'm in that place, But there are times where it's actually a dream. So I've had some where I'm just paralyzed and I'm awake and I don't like it. And I want you to wake me up. And I've moaned. That's about the most I could do.
I think this is important, particularly for as Christians operating on faith and believing that our dreams come from the three sources: God, our own body, or the demonic world, or the dark spiritual world. As a Christian, a response to those type dreams is to call on Jesus, okay, to call on the name of Jesus, which is a Christian principle of authority that we operate out of. And a lot of times, like where you were trying to quote a Bible verse, Satan, get behind me. Or we'll tell people, or they just know if I could just say the name Jesus, it will stop.
Right.
A lot of times what people don't realize is speaking it in their mind and speaking it in their dream is just as valid as declaring it with their physical mouth. I mean, it is proclaiming that authority.
Yeah.
It may be metaphorical in the dream. It may be more mental, a decision made with our mind, or it might be physical, speaking it with an open mouth. It's the exercising of the authority that makes the difference in the situation, the dream, or the encounter scenario that you're in.
Yeah, and I think because it hadn't happened to me in a while, but I think because it happens to me, or has happened to me quite often in the past, is I'm not thinking very clearly in that moment, although I feel like I am.
Yeah.
And so, but I do think you can, and we've talked about this before, make determinations before we get into a dream that we're, like if we have a night terror that bothers us, like if I have a lot of dreams with gorillas, I can, before I go to sleep, say, I will not be traumatized by gorillas in my sleep.
A declaration of faith.
And if I encounter one, I will have the power to overcome it or cause it to flee or whatever.
Right.
And so I just make that determination before I go to bed, and it really does. And I don't do that. I don't every night before I go to bed. I don't pray about
not having gorilla dreams.
I don't. But
I should have prayed about not having an alligator dream last night.
Yeah. So yeah, but I do think that even though I may make that determination sometimes, when I'm in that state, I'm not thinking about, if I don't say it out loud, it's that doesn't harm me. I could just say it in my dream, and that's the same. But like I said, sometimes I'm halfway in between a dream and a thing and an actual thinking I'm okay and I need to break out of this paralyzation. And for the most part, though, even when I'm trying to think clearly, like sometimes I've said to myself when I'm paralyzed, okay, I know I'm dreaming. I know I'm in this paralyzed state. What can I do to release myself? I feel the need to be released. It's almost like I feel like something else is holding me captive and that it's not God. That's how I feel, you know?
Well, and I think one of the things we need to recognize is the more we discuss these kind of topics, the more we people consider them and think about how to respond, the more likely you're going to recognize what's going on and the need to respond to it. But now, not everything requires us to respond to it. Sometimes we just respond in the dream. We have that sleep paralyzation is not functioning. Now, that's what happens when you were talking about earlier about the person who used it as a defense that they bludgeoned their wife and said they were sleepwalking, sleep talking. And your mom used to get up and go fix meals. Food and stuff. She would go get stuff out of the refrigerator.
Oh,
I remember,
she would go and get stuff out of the fridge.
Like she cooked.
I was like, wait a minute.
No.
My mom cooked in her.
No, I can remember your mom going and getting food out of the refrigerator and eating, and then swearing she never got up in the night. Right. So there are times when that sleep paralysis, and that's what sleep paralysis is for, to keep us from getting up and acting out things
that could harm us. But there are people who have gotten up and cooked in the middle of the night, and they didn't know it, and they left an eye on or something like that.
It can be a very dangerous thing. Exactly.
So we're thankful for this mechanism that God has created us
Absolutely. God created it for us as a protective measure, but there are then times when I guess you could say it just glitches.
Yeah.
And that's like what happened with me last night. You know.
Yeah.
And in a dream we talked about, I think on the very first podcast, we talked about me shaking in the bed when there was an angel that cut my tongue out.
Yeah. And I think you were probably somewhat paralyzed in that dream. I don't know that you really could move.
There was a physical response.
Yes,
it was a shaking there. So there's that not quite a true response like that original dream that we talked about on the podcast then. And then there is the actual, I think kicking or running. You know better what I was doing.
Oh, yeah.
I did.
So, and I worry because there have been times where you have been doing something in a dream, like moaning or something's going on, and I feel like you're in a really bad situation, and I feel bad for you because I wonder, is he paralyzed? Does he need my help?
Is he trying to say something? Get behind me.
Yeah. So, and I'll think, and then I'll wake you up and you'll say, I wish you hadn't done that because I was really in a good place.
Yeah. Well, that's hard. That's really hard for you to know. It's hard for a person who's observing someone dream to know what are they going through, what are they dealing with, what are they experiencing, and you kind of have to look at how is this person responding, not from just the natural state of they're running. They might be running to something, not running away from something.
Exactly.
So there's a little bit of discernment that has to come into play if you're going to intervene. And I'm just going to say I wouldn't be a huge advocate of always intervening.
Well, that's what I'm saying. There have been times where you were like, I wish you hadn't done that. I was about to open a treasure chest.
Yeah.
And I may have kept you from seeing what was in there, you know? And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Or one time you were like, I was Indiana Jones and I was running and it was so awesome. And you woke me up. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. So, yeah, we do need to be careful. So what I did was
last night you left me fighting a tapeworm.
I did. So here's what happened. I was wide awake because something had been happening with me. So I was just wide awake for 3 hours laying there. And then suddenly you started breathing hard, running. You were running, and I could feel your little arms beside me just twitching. I was like, he's running. And then I was like, no, he may not be running. He may be fighting something. So I just laid there, and then you were like, oh, and then you like moaned or something. I was like, okay, maybe I should wake him up. Does he need my help? I don't know, because I know that if I'm screaming or moaning, I need help. And I want you to wake me up. So I'm like, nope, I'm going to wait because he's always told me, don't wake me up. So then it happened again. In about 30 seconds, you did the same thing. And I was like, oh, my goodness. So then you quit and you calmed down. And then I heard you wake up. I was like, are you okay? And you were like, yeah, why? And I was like, were you fighting something? Was something after you? And you go, I don't know. You got up.
Yeah, because all I could think about right at that moment was I need to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, so when you came back.
I'm growing older, and it requires me to get up more frequently.
Okay, we don't need all that information. But anyway.
Well, I mean, it's just reality.
Yeah, so when you came back, I was like, you were like, hey, I did remember what I was dreaming, and then you shared.
Yeah, I did remember I was dreaming. So I had this, it was a really weird dream. So it's interesting what was going on, as you were observing me, you were awake observing me dreaming.
Right.
So I had been doing some repairs or some work of some kind around a building, and I won't name where the building is because as the dream goes on, our folks who interpret dreams and listen to the podcast could say, oh, that place is, or whatever. So we'll just stick to, I was in a building. I recognized the building. I knew where I was at. And we'd been doing some work of some kind, which I really don't remember that part of the dream, but I walked into a room that was kind of like a transition, a very short hallway between a kitchen and like a living room area. And I was in the living room den kind of area and going to walk through this little short, like a 6 or 8 foot maybe passageway between the two rooms. And I was going to walk through there and to the kitchen. And when I started that way, I realized there was an alligator laying against one of the hallway walls. Mm-hmm. And its tail was out into the den and its head was out into the kitchen. So it was like literally maybe 12-foot alligator or something. I mean, it was a big alligator. And then it's kind of gross, but it's pooping. And it poops a tapeworm. That's as big as it is. It was huge.
Yeah.
And when it did,
which is technically right. Most tapeworms are very long and can be longer than the actual host. So
yeah, and it was huge by length and width and breadth. Okay. It was just a big tapeworm,
right? And
so it poops the tapeworm, and it was almost like this is so weird. The tapeworm didn't go into a plastic bag literally, but when we went to try, and me and some of the other people who were there were going to go and try and get this tapeworm up and get rid of it. And it was partially, its tail end was in a plastic bag. So we were just trying to scoop it on up into that bag to get rid of it. And the alligator died in the process of releasing this. And so when I went over near it to grab the bag, I slipped down. So my feet went out from under me up towards the head of the tapeworm, the head of the alligator, and my torso was down back towards the tail and in the living room. And the tapeworm
I'll go for it, buddy. I'm listening.
The tapeworm was slashing, like sticking its big long tongue out or something with a hook on it, trying to grab my leg.
Which they do have hooks.
Okay. Well, anyway, it was trying to do this. And so I kept jerking, my legs.
Yes, you were.
Because I didn't want it to touch my leg. And I couldn't stand up because I was having to put my effort into
staying away
observing and staying away. So I'm trying to lay on the ground, keep my legs jerked away from it, and still get this tapeworm into a bag. And
you were working very hard.
I could
feel it.
Work. Yeah,
Thank God you were paralyzed.
Yeah, and
I don't mean like sleep paralysis. I mean like your body was doing its job. You were staying somewhat contained.
Yeah, it was working to the degree it needed to. I probably would have been kicking you out of the bed. So yeah. So it's one of those things that I was moving in response to it, and our son actually had
he just interpreted it really quick. What did he say?
Well, I won't say exactly what he said, but he said there's a lot of stuff going on at that place, and it's time for it to come to an end and no longer have an impact on you.
Yeah.
But there's a battle over it.
Yeah.
That's basically what the dream was about.
Yeah.
So it was a dream of warfare in one sense and overcoming in another.
Yeah.
That something was coming to an end.
Yeah.
And there would be a battle for it, but there'd be freedom.
That's cool because, we talked with one of our sons. It wasn't the same son who was on the podcast with us this last time. It was one of our other sons. And it's good to watch them. They've been around it enough. I think sometimes they think, oh, I'm not trained in dream interpretation. That's what my parents do.
But then they just do it.
We find that they do it all the time, and they understand it, and that's what happens. And again, we don't live by our dreams, but we know when we have one that really stands out to us, that it could be a message to us to listen to or pay attention to.
Yeah.
Not necessarily to live by, but it's just like a road sign. So.
Yeah, and in that particular dream, I didn't have to take authority or do anything.
Right.
I was metaphorically in the dream. I was just dealing with what needed to be dealt with.
Yeah.
And I stayed paralyzed enough to not cause a problem. And but there was a physical, spiritual dream correlation going on. And that happens a lot for people. So if you've been having dreams where you've been having some kind of physical response to it, or you've been sleepwalking, or you've had a dream where you're, paralyzed in your sleep, and you're sort of waking up and realizing it, maybe this episode helps a little bit to understand what's been going on.
That's right. That's right.
So, yeah.
That's really good. So I'm glad we got to talk about all that.
Yeah, and I guess our time is about up.
It
so
is.
We just remind people, like, share, and subscribe. We really appreciate it when you do that. And otherwise, we can say what we always say at the end of an episode.
Let me say it.
Go for it.
Keep on dreaming. Oh, it wasn't that, was it? Keep dreaming.